to all of you from Luzon to Mindanao. So it's a pleasure to be live. So how are you? Okay, so I hope everything is fine. You're doing well. So I'm excited to talk about this afternoon's topic because it's something that I have worked in the last maybe about more than 20 years. No? So today I will share my slides with you. Okay, so just bear 1 minute. Okay, so can you see my slides already? There, can you see it?
Yes, ma'am. I can see your slides.
Okay, so thank you. So the topic today is actually protecting children during the pandemic, which is COVID-19. And we'll try to take a look at child abuse and domestic violence. So domestic violence in relation to child abuse. Okay, so we know from history, we've had pandemics before, that there is increased um, risk of child maltreatment. So these are the consequences. We also have physical abuse, sexual abuse, emotional abuse. And of course, when you have pandemic, you have less services and less contact with adults because mostly they stay at home and they are in quarantine. And we know that previous studies about the quarantine tells us that there is increase in symptoms of psychological distress, depression, anxiety, and PTSD. Okay. And then we also know that in terms of intimate partner violence, we also have problems with this because they don't have access to justice, medical services, and there are a lot of restrictions and movements. It's not possible. And lastly, of course, the cost can be very difficult during this time. Okay. And I'd like to quote from one of the authors of UNICEF, where they say that we know that violence against children has been pervasive, but now it is getting much worse. We may not see it on the outside, but it is silently creeping in. And because of the lockdown, school closures, and movement restrictions, children have very few options. No? So without the safe place that the schools would normally offer, it can be very difficult for them. So it is urgent to scale up efforts to protect children during these times and beyond. And so this is these are my objectives for this morning. Describe the different forms of abuse, and then the impact, warning signs, and enumerate some of the things that we can do to help. So this is the framework by which we do our work. Basically, when you talk about trauma and abuse, even the online exploitation, sexual exploitation, we always talk about trauma-informed care. So this is the model that we espouse, and the person or the child is in the middle, and you use the different trauma-informed care principles, and at the end will be hope, healing, recovery, and resiliency. So that is the framework by which we always look at how we do things and how we run systems. So before the pandemic, you already have very high numbers. 70% of children who die from abuse are actually under age 4. And that 4 children die every day as a result of child abuse. And that 90% of juvenile sexual abuse victims know their perpetrator. So it can really be very difficult. So during the pandemic, what can we say? So we may say that the children and their families are not safe because we have cases where we have incest and we also have domestic violence. So COVID-19 conditions like staying at home most of the time, being inside confined places, may actually stimulate violence in families and worse in cases where it was present before. So you can start new cases and you can worsen old cases. And the cost in terms of physical, mental outcomes can be very high. You also have high risk for chronic diseases that are associated with mental health problems, substance abuse, depression, PTSD, and a lot of risky sexual behaviors among children. And it can also cause a lot of injuries and even death in some cases. How about the perpetrators? So perpetrators are usually known by the children, and some of these may be the parents or uncles or relatives. And this may be due to what we call parenting stress. In the Philippines, I think a lot of it would be financial stress, some with mental illness, increased substance use, social isolation, negative interactions with children. Just the other day, I had a seafarer who was suffering from anxiety and depression. He never actually hit his children. He has a 3-year-old and 1 year old. And now he actually, even if he didn't want to because of his situation and mental health, he actually hit his children. So parenting is very important in these times. But you can see their situation can actually um, make them hurt their children. So you add the trauma of severe illness or loss of loved ones in this time when we don't have any rituals such as funeral and reduction in suspension of religious gatherings, which can be very difficult for a lot of people. And we also don't have grief support, unlike before. You know, in the Philippines, support when there is somebody um, who passed away, support can be very important. So overall increased risk is very high, or overall risk is very high. It is increased because of what? So for children, school closure, where a lot of times children may talk to their guidance officers or their teachers. And we all know, I think among you parents, do you agree that you struggle to teach your children online, that it can actually be more difficult now compared to when they were going to school, right? So a lot of parents would ask, what are some of the things that we can do at home? So it can be very difficult. Okay, now let's look at intimate partner violence. We know that approximately 1 in 4 women and nearly 1 in 10 men have experienced intimate partner violence. So we have male, no? So not just female who are being hit. No? So there is violence, which includes stalking and physical violence. And we know that more than 43 million women and 38 million men experience psychological aggression by an intimate partner in their lifetime. So in these times, what do you expect? Okay, so this is IPV is associated with negative physical and mental health outcomes. And we also know that there is increasing numbers as a result of the quarantine because there is no option. They just stay home and it forces the victims to stay in dangerous situations. Whereas before they could actually ask help. It was easier for them to ask help. So in other countries, let's take a look at what was happening. The initial phase survey in Norway, for example, results show that in the beginning, February, March, and even April, there was a reduction in number of requests from clients, and they were worried that it was very quiet, which is the same with in the Philippines at the Child Protection Unit. You're worried that there were no cases, and you're worried that they are not receiving help, the kind of help that they need. And so, as I've said, most of the respondents in that survey were worried that children were not actually receiving the help they needed, and there was great concern for children living with abusive parents and increasing stress for the abusers. In the UK, there was also a surge in domestic child abuse during the pandemic. Take note that in 1 month, the cases increased to what? 1,493%, very high. So compared to the 3 years, and that is why they call it the silent pandemic. So your domestic child abuse can be your silent pandemic. So you have the COVID-19, but under it, very silent is your child abuse. And then in Norway, they also noted their helpline reported a sharp increase in number of calls from worried children. And the rates of child abuse and neglect was 5 times higher for children in families with low socioeconomic status. And that is the same for our country. And so we know that during the pandemic, there are less follow-up. It's difficult to go out and seek help. There are less activities and there is less monitoring by our social workers. And so with all of this, um, we are fearful that we will see more suicides or familicide. Okay, so we are cautious and we want to make sure that we're able to reach out to these children. So in the Philippines, we have more than 100 child protection units. So we also have WCPUs now in the beginning, child protection unit. Okay, so this is the usual numbers that we have at the child protection unit. So usually you have more than 3,000 to more than 9,000 over 4,000 cases of violence. And we've had in 2017, 21,966 children treated. And the highest would be sexual abuse, 64%. And we know that we also have 66% reported physical violence, so very high. Okay, now let's take a look at the other data. Perpetrators of child physical abuse usually was a father, next a neighbor, then a stranger. Perpetrators of sexual abuse in 2017, the highest was a neighbor. Kaya we have to be wary of neighbors, or when we interview, let's ask about the neighbors, followed by the boyfriend, the uncle, father, and stranger. Okay, so a lot of the in 2015 sexual violence among children occurs at home, very high. That is why now in quarantine we know that it is happening. And majority of these were referred by the police, followed by walk-in. So this one, with the help of Jason, our psychologist, thank you, Jason. So we have these numbers from March to October. So in the beginning, we have high number, and then suddenly it was quiet, the same as other countries. And you can see it is what increasing. This one is still the halfway of the month. So we expect it to be the usual number. And if you look at the numbers for each, so we have here, these were usually the suicidal or one or two who are psychotic that needs medication. And the highest during the pandemic is still sexual abuse. And some we have a mix of face-to-face and telepsych. Okay? So this is the total number, no, that we have for this month. So these are the numbers for each of the months that we had at the child protection unit. Okay, so we have been doing telepsych also. Now let's look at the background. What is the relationship of adverse childhood experience, which all of these children are experiencing now, the pandemic? So we know that there is a relationship between adverse child experience and also later on health, no? Obesity, diabetes, behaviors, academic achievement, and then for the parents, no, lost time from work. So basically, during this time, parents are all stressed and they usually respond in aggressive or abusive ways because of the stress that they are experiencing. And this is the landmark research done by Ramiro Madrid Brown, which is all done also in other countries. In the Philippines, we already have a very high, no, adverse childhood experience result. 75% of men and women had at least one exposure to an adverse childhood experience. So if there were more than 100 here or 200, no, two-thirds would have experienced trauma. And 75% no, had at least one exposure to an adverse childhood experience. And 9%, which is very high, had four or more types of abuse and dysfunctions in the home. And so you have these numbers, and you can see that they have lived with an alcoholic or problem drinker and in a home with domestic violence. So you can see even without the pandemic, you already have this problem. And you add the situation we're in now, it's going to be a lot more difficult. Okay? And we know that there is a relationship between adverse child experience, health risk behaviors, and later on poor health. So you can see here the result later on. If they were psychologically abused, they will usually attempt suicide later, have multiple sex partners, have early pregnancy. Those who are sexually abused, very high, 12 times they will engage in early sex, 5 times for us, not likely to attempt suicide. That's why we really have to care for them. And early smoking and use of drugs, when we see them, maybe there is history of any trauma or adverse childhood experience. Okay. And here, the ACEs fact sheet, all of this, can actually be due to adverse childhood experience. That's why I think even the government program should consider this as part of their programs. And what happens during the pandemic, we have less services. At the Child Protection Unit, because one time, a lot of the uh, service providers had to go on quarantine. We had two teams, no? So that if one needs to take a break, then there's still another group. Because as you can see in the beginning, all of us were scared in the beginning. And there was no school. Children could not tell their teachers or counselors about their situation. And families do not have the technology in the Philippines to stay connected to their friends or extended family and report what is happening to them. Okay, so WHO, this is the recent report of WHO, says that there is risk, in households with domestic violence, and that there is an increase in violence and abuse against women and girls, and that security, health, and financial concerns may actually increase tension at home that will result to domestic violence. And the review of pandemics, and violence against women and children says that the fear and uncertainty of the pandemic provides an enabling environment that may spark diverse forms of violence against women and children. So, what are the direct and indirect, uh, causes? So you have economic instability, inability to escape, and then your situation where you're on quarantine and social isolation. Okay, and of course, even in other countries, this is what um, they say that those living in overcrowded areas, which we have here in the Philippines, they are particularly vulnerable. I remember a research done many, many years ago when I was still younger. One of the factors, that they considered in that research of the SWD was also overcrowding, one of the factors. Okay. And aside from it being a silent pandemic, they're also describing this situation as a second pandemic. Okay, so the risk is, as we know, the effect on the brain, irreversible scarring of a generation. So we know, in terms of the research among rats, for example, that even if you remove the violence or the trauma, they still do not go back to their normal play, which is the same with children. They do not exactly go back to how they are. Of course, we balance it with resiliency and plasticity. Okay. So the second pandemic is increased child abuse and neglect. So there is a paradox where the government will ask its citizen to stay home. But what happened? So we are safe from the COVID, but the other side of the coin is there is domestic violence and abuse. That is why, you have to balance between the two. Okay. So it can really be very difficult. And of course, you also have, aside from sexual abuse, you also have bullying online. You also have online sexual exploitation. And you know that if you look at worldwide data, up there in terms of numbers is the Philippines. If I'm not mistaken, in the last year, I don't know this year, but the Philippines was actually there, the third when you talk about the numbers. So it may look easy or not difficult for children, but we know that it can lead to wider range of psychological problems. So online sexual exploitation. So I am actually devoting more time with online sexual exploitation because I think aside from the other types of abuse, we need to also be conscious, or maybe we have to ask about online sexual exploitation when we assess children. Okay, so if you look according to UNICEF, in the Philippines, you have 90% no, who can access the internet. 600,000 are your online sexual exploitation images, and 80% of children with history of some form of abuse, and 2 in 10 children are vulnerable victims of online sexual abuse and exploitation. And we know those who are vulnerable no, are those with prior history of sexual abuse. So even those with sexual abuse, for example, they are at high risk of having another abuse if they are not educated. Okay, so let's look at the other studies, no, where the most vulnerable to sexual approaches and grooming, again, tend to be high-risk youth with prior history of sexual abuse. That's why there's a relationship between the ones that we see at the Child Protection Unit and later on, these are the same population who will later on be abused online, no, because of how they respond to their problem and their decision making. And because now, right now during quarantine, very easy to access and multitude of offerings online. And because of poverty in the Philippines, like for example, in Metro Manila, there's one city where you have one town full of victims, children who are victims of online sexual exploitation. In the Visayas, the same thing. You have one barangay where everybody knows about it, even the leaders of the community, and no one is doing anything. And it is good that our social workers and some agencies are doing something about it. So these are the different forms of child abuse and exploitation. So made to order child sexual abuse material, sexting, broadcasting of live sexual abuse, no, and all of this. And this can be used as blackmail. And adolescents not taking most at risk online were more likely to face negative consequences than those who did not engage in risky online behavior. That's why parents will need to monitor their children. Okay? And they were more likely to be sensation seekers who have low level of satisfaction with their lives and with their families. So in the Philippines, it is more complex because of the participation of the family. Sometimes they are the perpetrators, they are the pimps, they are the ones who actually sell their children or relatives because of financial problems. And sometimes it's even being touted as normal. Anyway, they will say nothing happened to them. It's just online, not knowing that it is actually more difficult. Okay. So there is what we call double silencing, no, caused by the fact that they feel there is evidence of their willing participation. Okay. So they may appear smiling, but later on, when they understand what's happening to them, that is when you have the mental effects. Okay. And very few will disclose their sexual abuse, and fewer will disclose their abuse when it occurs on the internet or online. Okay, and we know that these children will usually go to krame. Okay, and the dynamics no, here would be that there is control, permanence, no, because it's out there. Even if you remove it, it can just come back when you're probably older. And there's blackmail, and there's victimization over and over, and there is self-blame. And a lot of these children later on may have 4 out of 5 PTSD as their diagnosis. So you can see here online victimization, you have all of these factors that may contribute to online victimization. Okay, so the impact no, of technology during this time, the online child sexual abuse, will be all of this. These are PTSD signs and symptoms, and they could actually commit suicide or have problems related to depression and anxiety and PTSD. Okay, so again, they will fear the sexual images will be shared online. Just imagine your picture anytime, any moment will be out there. That can be difficult for children. And being filmed, let them to feel uncomfortable around cameras. That is why some children might actually be fearful of going like the telesite. They might not want to do it because of online exploitation. And then when in constant contact with the person, they become fatigued because usually the contact is at night. And because of all of this, there is low sense of self-esteem. Okay? So some, of course, will blame themselves because of what happened. And a lot of the parents are not supportive. Okay? So in the Philippines, we can see that uh, the cases no, showed the cases that we saw, for example, the ones that we particularly assess. We've had cases from Mindanao who go to Manila for assessment. These were actually cases that you'd probably be aware of. And some were actually from different parts of the country. And you can see that the trauma, it's not just the actual online abuse, but also related to being rescued and transferred from one place to another. Okay? So in that same study, we can see that they have very poor relationship with their family. There is less parental care and more parental overprotection in some. They usually have lower self-esteem, and abuse online and offline scored higher trauma symptoms than those abused only online. Okay, so the difference was significant for only for depression. So in the Philippines, as I've said, no, so the most difficult is not the actual online sexual exploitation, but a lot of times in the beginning, it is the separation from their families. Okay, and we know that this is what associated with poor health, low self-esteem, and problems with relationships. And in the Philippines, we are using the Child Protection Unit, the PTAQ. This is by Dr. Laines. And this is a way for us to determine the level of their trauma. So usually if it's more than 30, the psychotherapy is mandatory for the children. And usually they have so I have a few minutes. Okay, so the depression related to separations, as I've said, no, is the one that's being very difficult for children with online sexual abuse. And this is strongly associated with depression. But we need, again, these are anecdotal reports, so we need more studies. And I think now, for example, most universities no, are looking at this, and worldwide, like for example, there's a conference this October by Marie Collins where we are going to talk about online sexual exploitation. Okay? Actually, there was one conference before the lockdown that was February where we went to Thailand and talk about this is an Asian conference by UNICEF where all the experts no, on child abuse were there, and part of what I talked about was the Philippine experience. Okay, so again, the findings no, here, we can say that when they talk no, or posting no, of nude pictures on the community site can later on no, uh, predispose them to online sexual abuse. Okay, so again, as we've said, children that we are dealing in the Philippines do have different forms of abuse, and usually they do not have good relationship with their parents, and parents usually do not have time to supervise, or if they have time to supervise, they have problems with finances, like so they have to earn a living or go abroad. So it's really very difficult. I think the dynamics is more complex. It is not just the psychological, but the economic aspect of it is also very important. And usually they belong to what we call the polyvictimized group. So they have physical abuse, online sexual abuse, and then there's domestic violence. And so all of these types of abuses in one family can be very difficult. But it is important to take note that many forms of child abuse and exploitation involve the same, no? Those online and non-digital ones, no? Have the same dynamics, patterns, and structures as non-digital ones. I think the difference can be the reason why they will have mental health problems. And the online, no, or the digital ones can be more challenging because you have multiple and ongoing traumatizing aspects to it. Okay. And what makes children and teens at risk for online victimization? So they say it's not the internet per se, but the pattern of online behaviors. That's why we have to what? um, Monitor, no, the online behaviors of children and other psychosocial problems. And almost all of the youth reporting online victimization, 96%, also reported at least one offline victimization. That is why the children that we see at the WCPU are also the children likely to have online problems. So these are the odds, no, very high risky online behaviors of third and fourth year high school students in a public and private high school in Metro Manila, predisposing to sexual solicitation and harassment. So here, there is increased 4 times for those visiting X-rated website, okay? And those uh, twice for those sending personal information online and interacting with unknown persons, okay? So if you increase the internet more and your online behavior is different, then you have increased risk for being abused. Okay, the factors that exacerbates the effects of trauma is the lack of control of the online images, the permanence of online abuse images. So there was actually in one of the conference who talked about her experience and uh, before as a child she had these problems and later on now as a lawyer she was talking about it and still would somehow feel something inside because of the permanence, no? So you were 7 or 10 and then you're a lawyer, you're still um, fearing, no, that it's still out there. It can be very difficult, and the surveillance and ongoing threat of the gaze, no, of other people can be very difficult. And shame and humiliation that the images remain in public and that they may be further harmed if they are asked to recount. That's why we're careful when we see these children to be trauma informed, that in the beginning when we interview, we want to make sure that they are not traumatized by our questions and how we ask. Okay? So how do we now deal with these problems? So from the different types of abuse to neglect, for the online sexual exploitation, there is no definite therapy, but there are now, of course, studies showing that some of the therapies are actually helpful because we know that the images are forever. So this is one way of keeping children safe online, COVID-19 parenting. So in your practice, I hope you will teach the parents of your patients, no, about being safe online. So this one teaches them, no, creating healthy and safe online habits, tech fixes to protect your children online, spend time with your children or teen online, and keep your children safe with open communication. So these are very basic. And this one also, you want some help staying safe online, no? Something like this, you will see this online. So in treatment, we have to consider the developmental stages of the child. And we also need to review the way in which we talk about recorded images because it might actually traumatize, it might actually incite, no, some memories. And we do not interview in front of parents. And we also need time, no, to explain to the parents and answer their concerns. Of course, some may feel that they are in love, but we know the power, no, of authority of older over the younger ones. Okay, so it is important when we treat. Of course, we have these interventions, but it is important that um, recognition about this should really be part of the curriculum, and that they should be made aware of seduction techniques, grooming techniques, and they will also need to understand, how they are affected. So the online risk are actually related to offline risk. Okay, so we need to let them understand. Okay, so in the Philippines, what have we done? Okay, so in the last few years, I think more than 5 years now, we developed what we call the TIP. It's a trauma-informed psychosocial processing. Because of the number of child psychiatrists, very few child psychiatrists, and we have more than 100 WCPUs. So with Azusa University, we developed the TIP, which is a trauma-informed psychosocial processing. It's a CBT-based form of therapy where we help, the children by initially doing psychoeducation and then helping them with coping, and then the narrative, telling, retelling, meaning making, and then safety skills, so that they will heal. And right now, we already have more than, if I'm not mistaken, 70 trained social workers and psychologists. Just last Friday, I did a late after in the afternoon, so we usually conduct supervisions. We supervise them with 5 cases, and we're very happy that, like for example, now during quarantine, the social workers who are also living in the same place can actually do this with the children, help them heal. So we also have to educate parents, and then we also help them how to handle online, sexual exploitation. So these are all the, of course, the modalities depending on the age of the child. As I've said, the telling and retelling, coping, and then dealing with traumatic sexualization, stigmatization, betrayal, powerlessness, and then their problems with self-concept, the way they look at the world, and how they deal with their emotions. Okay, so again, we have to be cautious, when we talk about meaning making. In some of the children, it might actually internalize their shame and humiliation instead of helping them. Okay, so just to say, CPN's contribution, we've been training teachers also because they're very important. Usually, this is where children will talk about their abuse. So hopefully, even online now, because there are classes, they'll be able to tell their children, tell their teachers, I mean, sorry about that. Okay, so what are the, of course, we need multi-sectoral response plan on violence against students, and a structure for implementation that should be nationwide. Okay, and of course, when we deliver this, it should be gender sensitive. Okay, and as I said a while ago, we, of course, we want everyone to be trauma informed. Siguro pati yung mga ano natin, no, yung ating mga leaders in the community. Baka dapat pati nga yung mga ano natin, no, senators, congressman, mga mayor, dapat trauma informed din sila, so that they will change the way their organization will do things and help. And these are some of the principles which I will no longer discuss one by one. Okay, and these are the things that are needed. So when we deal with these children, we have to help them with resiliency, that they feel that they are lovable, that they are capable, and that they are safe. So all of these ingredients, especially when they have attachment, and they have an individual that is always there, no, to support them. So this is the title of the trauma-informed psychosocial processing that we have done in 2015. It started in 2014. We called it Journey Towards Healing, Paglalakbay Patungong Paghilom. So these are all the authors of this, okay? And this is the model, no? So if you look at it, usually we have 4 to 5 days of training. So from education, coping, relaxation, which is it's actually fun, no, for the ones that we're training, because they are also relaxed, we're also relaxed. And then processing the traumatic memories can be multiple sessions, and then meaning making and safety skills. So that's basically how it is done. So in general, at coming to my end, um, when we see cases of child abuse during the pandemic, okay, so it should include assessment risk of child abuse. Okay, so ask the family about stress level and how caregivers manage their stress. Because again, it will redound to how they're going to deal with children. And then ask about relationship between caregivers, because they might have domestic violence. And then ask about social support and what is being used by the family. And so the family would have options. And then you know that there's increased risk when you have alcohol and other substance use in the family, and look for signs of irritability and depression in caregivers, because when you have domestic violence, there goes your child abuse. And then look for harsh responses to child behaviors. Yung masyadong very sila, no, rude, punitive. And then look for signs of fearfulness and dysregulation in the affect or the emotions, no, of children and family. And then look for evidence of controlling behaviors by one caregiver. Okay. Use of telehealth technology poses a challenge nowadays. That is why, as I've said, no, there's one research, no, that were involved, CPU and me, of course, with LaSalle. The other one, it's a short one comparing, this is a fellow, no, comparing telepsych, using telepsych, using the TEEP model and a control. No? So we'll see if we have the same results comparing to face-to-face. Okay? And then redefining essential services during a crisis. Of course, it's important for governments, if we, or you, the future, no, the young ones, supposedly during this pandemic, it's not just those dealing with COVID, but we have to designate social service workers as essential, ensuring that they are protected, providing additional resources for them. And then we need to strengthen child helplines. No, so there's already some, but I don't think it is enough. And then making positive parenting resources available. The one that's being used by the MAPA, no, is already modified, no, so that it can be used, no, during the pandemic. And then enhancing training on child-friendly counseling and adopting referral system. And then, of course, we must acknowledge, no, the critical part or the service of our social service professionals in this time. Kasi hindi lang naman yung mga other professions. No? And then in the end, when you go over all of the things that we have to do for these children, this is actually what is important, no, yung in preventing, addressing violence against children. Okay, so from the campaigns to addressing the socio-economic risk and promoting a child-friendly and safe environment. Okay, because of the increasing population. And this is the Philippine Plan of Action to End Violence Against Children. So you can see all of this, no, should be in place. This is the impact pyramid for interventions for sexual violence. So all of this. So ito tayo, no, mga alcohol, women, yan. Okay? So with that, I'd like to summarize that we were able to talk about child abuse in different forms and domestic violence, and that there is a need to have more research during this pandemic about, for example, telepsych and some of the interventions. And it is important to take note that all of us, you listening, have a role to play in ensuring the safety and protection of children, that we are all in this together. But you are not supposed to also forget yourselves as, no? So we're very important that we have to have self-care. And with that, you now can practice trauma-informed care, and you now give hope to the next generation and help them be resilient. So with that, I'd like to thank you and a pleasant good evening. So these are the references. Thank you.